Hey, it's Freitag. In this podcast, we interview business owners in New Hampshire and beyond to get their perspective on work, growth, and of course, the weekend. Join our host, Freitag marketing owner Jan Ziegler, as he interviews fascinating guests. We hope you'll enjoy this episode.
Welcome to another episode of It's Freitag. I'm Jan. Today I'm joined by Barb Weisman, who's the executive director of the Community Kitchen. And welcome, Barb. So, usually starts, the first question almost always is, how did you end up here? And, let's back up. We just had a quick chat. You kind of were all over the country, working all these different jobs, national nonprofits. Before that, you were in real estate. How did that all get started?
Yeah, so I grew up mainly in Connecticut, just outside of New York City. And it's funny, I was thinking about, what we were going to talk about today. And I was thinking about how, you grow up and you think, I'm going to be different. I'm the rebel. I'm the one with the pierced nose and the tattoos. I'm going to be different than my family. I'm going to be different than my parents. And then you look back and you're like, oh my God, I am my parents. I'm exactly the product of, what they raised. And so, I grew up in Connecticut. My parents owned their own business and worked out of the house before people tended to do that. So I had this model of seeing my parents, not really have much division between work and life. We saw my dad sitting on the deck in his shorts doing business and playing tennis in the middle of the afternoon. And
Without aging you, that is crazy for that time. Nobody did that.
Right. This is back in the 70s, right? And so he and my mom started their own business and, he would pop up and go play tennis in the middle of the afternoon. And in community service was a huge part of my growing up. So, also growing up Jewish, we spent the Christmas holiday always trying to be in service, serving meals at the homeless shelter. Or, back then you were able to actually go and help work at hospitals. People don't do that so much anymore, so that staff could have the holiday off. And so it was really ingrained in me from the get-go that this is what we do. We kind of march to our own drum and, we do our own thing.
That is crazy. If I think about, what you do now, which is you bring, we'll talk about this later, you bring businesses and nonprofits together. Your dad did that.
Right. And I remember being absolutely horrified as a kid. My dad would change his clothes in a parking lot. He'd go to a meeting or something and then he'd pull off his, switch into his shorts behind an open car door. And we're like, oh my God, don't do that. But now it's this is how life is, right? We multitask. So anyway, I attribute my lack of work-life balance to my parents, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's just, for me, finding work that could be part of my life is how I roll. I don't know how to separate those two things.
Yeah, that's funny. It's I've been thinking more about this because, you think about work-life balance and all this stuff. I work a lot and all. Look at my dad. He's a carbon copy of me. He doesn't stop working.
Right. We try for a minute to think we're going to be different. And then you look in the mirror and you're like, wow, that's my mom.
Yeah. It's I just 9 to 5 is not for me. What am I going to do all this other time? Cool. So then you went off to college. How did your professional career kind of start out?
Yeah, so here I am trying to, shock and, wow everybody. So I go to college and I come out from this great, expensive liberal arts education with a fine arts degree. And, everybody rolling their eyes what on earth are you going to do with that? I was lucky enough to work in that field actually for a while. And it was kind of a really exciting time because when I was studying graphic arts, there weren't computers yet. So again, aging myself back in the Stone Age. I was working nights for newspaper. We were still stripping galleys of text that were, coming out of the lino print machine and sending things into the dark room and film days, so it was pretty cool to watch that progression into digital. And I went from there to quickly into management of production, production management and art direction. So I became hands-off really quickly, which was probably a good thing because the technology was outpacing me drastically, and ended up sort of in the purchasing side of the business, which I loved. Buying things is so much funner than selling things. And so I ended up purchasing print products, which was super fun for a while. Again, technology outpaced me at some point, but back then we were overseeing big, giant room-size printing presses and that kind of stuff.
And was there ever a consideration at that point to go back into the family business, or was that never really on the table?
Nope. My dad's business was his thing. He didn't share it with the rest of us. It was very specific. He was an aeronautical engineer and bought and sold airplanes. Not my interest at all. So no, I was going to go off and be, a happy artist and, have nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah. Okay, but so there was not like this like family pressure of like, okay, when are you coming?
Nope. It was, march to your own drum, do your own thing, but be of service was, I think, kind of the family business was, we're just here for a short time and we got to make a difference is kind of the ethic that was instilled in all of us.
That's fascinating. And so then you kind of like you switched gears from that through sort of like moments, and you got into like type 1 diabetes, nonprofit.
Yeah, so there's a common thread in all of this somewhere. I haven't quite found it, but there's definitely a thread in terms of project management. And I had a little stint in real estate for a while, and real estate really is just project management. It's always fun to make that connection, building in, and there's a thread from that to nonprofit work as well, building those relationships, understanding what the need is, what motivates people. But once you've kind of nailed down that deal and closed the deal, after that, it's project management, right? You got to line up all the inspections, all the different things, the mortgage, everything that has to happen. And you hit the closing date, you keep everything on track. It's just project management.
That is so true. Like if I now think about it, it's like if you basically 80% of all office jobs are a combination of like sales in some capacity, right? Whether it's internal or external, and project management. Like that's really all it is. I mean, it's what marketing is.
Yeah. So there's some basic things there, and purchasing versus sales, just the other side of the coin. But during that time, there were some major stressors in my life. I had small kids, went through a divorce, and I started to find my way of dealing with my own personal stress was exercise. Got into long distance cycling, long distance running. Triathlon kind of became my thing as a way to that was my medication of choice, and I figured there were worse things I could do, And at 5 years old, my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I was on the internet and stumbled upon this thing called the Ride to Cure Diabetes, which was people who were doing long distance cycling events as fundraisers, charity fundraisers. And I'm like, wow, that's perfect. I'm not, how else can I help my daughter? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. I don't know what else to do, but I can help raise money for a cure and show my support. And at the same time, build this incredible network of support. So I hopped right in with both feet and, started riding with the team. Before I knew it, I was coaching the team. I became a certified cycling coach, was coaching the team. I was spending so much time doing this. It was like, why aren't I getting paid to do this? A position opened up with the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, and I was like, all in, like, sign me up.
So basically, like these two, I mean, not that like it was like a voluntary interest, the diabetes stuff, because that just kind of like came into your life. But then the endurance sports that you chose, like there's like this job of one.
Exactly.
That marries those two interests, right?
Exactly. I mean, there are several different charities that have cycling events. There's these Alzheimer's ride. There's, once you're in sort of that niche, you're like, oh, there actually are charity cycling events. It's a thing that happens. So it's not all that unique. But for me, it was, again, none of this was ever on my bingo card. It's like, it just kind of came together.
Yeah. I know like even local nonprofits here, they run, they host 5Ks, 10Ks, that kind of stuff for, charity runs. Why are running and cycling events such a good fundraising model?
I think anytime we commit ourselves to doing something hard and telling people, it's a matter of, showing up with authenticity, that I've got skin in the game. I'm trying to do something here. I think people want to support us, right? And also, I always told people when I was working in that gig is like, you can go out and run a marathon and brag about it. And people would roll their eyes and they're like, oh, there she is bragging about her marathon again. Or I can run a marathon for charity. And I can tell you why this is important to me and why I'm doing it. And I can tell you how it relates, like how my daughter has to struggle to keep herself alive every day. That is so, like the correlation, especially in type 1 diabetes with endurance sports, to me was like a no-brainer. For me, gutting it out on a bike for 100 miles is like her just trying to get through a math test, right? Like I can take that. I can't take it for her, but I can feel it for a minute. Like, this is how hard it is. And I can relate that. I can share that with you. And like, you can go like, oh yeah, I never really thought about like a kid whose blood sugar is crashing or going through the roof all day long.
But like in mile 60, you know what that feels like.
Exactly. And she's just a 6-year-old kid, so to be able to tell her story in that way and have people be like, yeah, I want to support you in you doing that. And I want to support her in finding a cure. It's like super impactful.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than like a fundraising dinner with an expensive ticket and a raffle, right? Like, or a silent auction for. Okay, no, that makes sense. Because I was just wondering about that because you're right. There's so many fundraising runs and triathlons and cycling races. So you did that for a long time.
Yeah, for a little over 10 years. So yeah, I sort of, went through the ranks at the what was formerly the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. Shout out to them. They are now Breakthrough T1D. Still really, really important in my life, obviously, because my daughter still lives with type 1 diabetes. Until we find a cure for it, that will always be really important to me. But I really learned a lot about what it means to be in the nonprofit world, to be passionate about a cause, to share that passion with others and build connection, build those relationships, which, like sales and everything else we were talking about, it's all the same thing. It's all about building relationships, right? And learning about really large national nonprofits, which are kind of an entity into themselves, which is interesting.
I find, so coming from Germany, and I try not to go too much into Germany, but like the size and the impact of nonprofits in the US compared to like what we know in Germany is just insane. Because in Germany we have this, our social welfare system is much better. So like the state kind of takes care of more things, and here they don't. And so there's so much money that nonprofits both receive but then also distribute that it's always to me absolutely mind blowing just how large these organizations are. Like even something like the National Humane Society is like
Right. And their influence, one of the things I loved, I was in a very specific niche job running cycling events, but we all participated in lobbying. There was a very strong advocacy center. And so at least once a year, we would go to Washington, D.C., and we would join the advocacy team that would teach us about what it means to go to Capitol Hill and to speak to our representatives and how to do that and what our talking points are. And it was like really like that was one of my favorite things to do, was to learn about the impact that an organization of that size that generates that level of financial contribution, that there is impact with the NIH, with our congressional members. Like there is serious impact there.
Cool. And so you were again on the forefront of like what now is very common, which is you work remotely, kind of like from wherever you wanted to or needed to.
Yep.
That was an anomaly then, probably like one of the very few people. Did you love it?
I did love it. There's a lot to love about it, like not putting on pants is something to love, wearing flip-flops all year long, being home with my dogs. It was also just sort of, it became natural to us of how we built connections and how we built teams. My coworkers were all over the country, New York, Cincinnati, Texas, all over the place. And I traveled a lot. So I was gone in high season a week out of every month. So, that's disruptive. It becomes your normal, but it's like it's a different world.
Yeah. Yeah, because you miss a quarter of whatever's going on where you're currently actually living, right?
Right. But like we saw during COVID times, we adjust to our normal, right? Like that was normal. Like, we found ways to have kind of conversations you would have over the cubicle in your office. Like, we sidebar team messaged each other before COVID made everybody else do it. We did cocktail hour online. Like, we turned our cameras on so we had some face-to-face interaction with other human beings. Like you just kind of learned to live in that space, and that became my normal.
And I think it is like, it is for, I'm very much like, I love the hybrid. Like I love the freedom to like not have to be in the office, but also I love being in the office. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have to come here every day, but I do because I like it. But I think like we have a fully remote team and people love it because they're like, oh, okay, like I'm going to go visit a friend in Spain for like 3 months. I'm just going to work from Spain. Like to me.
But when you do just one or the other, the segue back is really kind of weird. Like the hybrid is good because you're used to people and being, when I ended up where I am now and in a full on in person, really important to be hands on and in person, I have to say I'm still getting used to it. I mean, it's been a bit of a shock.
Well, yeah, because you also have like the freedom and the flexibility, right, that you have to like do your grocery run in the middle of the day, or like a lot. Like the one thing that I notice is like when I have like really busy days, I'm like, oh, I actually have to do my laundry on the weekend, like because I don't get to it during the week. Because usually you can do it between meetings and that kind of stuff. It's like the small stuff that suddenly you're like, oh yeah, I usually just do that on the side.
Yeah, or even like I joked with my friends that in looking for other jobs, that I said I discussed it with my dog, and she doesn't like the idea. Like you get used to just kind of being with your dog all day. And
so let's talk a little bit about sort of how do you left JDRF or actually, well, how you came to Keene first, which I think that came first. How did you end up here?
Yeah, this is a wild story that still has my head spinning because I don't really know how this happened. But I was living out in Northern California and some big family life stuff was going on. And it became immediately apparent that I needed to get back to New England pronto. And so I came back east. This was the very end of COVID times for a few weeks and then returned to California, committed to needing to purchase a house and move. And so I was familiar living in Western Mass for 25 plus years with the sort of 91 corridor. We would go up to Brattleboro all the time for fun. And I was like, I didn't really want to go back to where I had come from. I wanted something different. And I thought, I'll go to Brattleboro. I've always liked it that, we'll do that. So I started just making offers on houses. My real estate background kicked in and I'm like, I'm not afraid of the system. And I tried and tried and tried to buy property in Brattleboro and I just kept getting outbid. It was that time when things were going $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over asking price. And I was not in that financial situation. I'm just a humble nonprofit gal. And so the realtor called me up and said, hey, there's a house coming on the market in Keene. Are you interested? And I was like, I don't know. I've never been to Keene, actually. Maybe I was in town once for a dentist appointment, but I don't remember it. Somebody told me I was, but I don't recall that. So I don't remember ever having been in Keene. I didn't really see myself living here. I was like, I don't really think so. But she sent me a couple pictures of the house. I saw a picture of the front and the back of the house in the dead of winter, which is also a shock when you're in Northern California. And I said, you know what? Offer them full price. I don't really want to live there. If they don't take it, I don't really care because I could take it or leave it. They came back and said yes, which is like shocking to me. Like the universe somehow just was like, here you go. So I'm like, I guess I'm moving to Keene. Packed up my car and my dog and I started driving from California. And the first time I saw the house in Keene was on closing day when I rolled in from California.
That's insane.
What could go wrong?
I mean, I think it's just absolute insanity because to just buy a house sight unseen is already probably freaking out a lot of people here. Like they're like, how can you know? But then also like in a city that you've never been in or town really, plus, I mean, and now knowing, how fundamentally different Brattleboro and Keene are.
Exactly, exactly. And I had no idea. Yeah. I was just like, I was getting frustrated. I was making offers. I'm like, I gotta go. This has to happen. And, again, I had this national job that was remote. I could work from anywhere. And I'm like, it's fine. Yeah. I'm sure it's fine.
Okay.
And if it's not, I'll leave. But
okay. So how were your first few months in Keene?
Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. This community is so incredibly special. And I'm preaching to the choir of anybody who's listening to this that lives here, that this is a really special place. And I just found my people immediately. I mean, I was welcomed and, my neighborhood is incredible. My house is amazing. I love it. I'm in the same house and, they're going to have trouble ever getting me out of that house. I love it. And, it's just a super welcoming community. And, I think none of this, as I said to you before, none of this was on my bingo card. I didn't think this was the trajectory of my life. But when I got here and I started to meet people, the thing that came to mind is I want to be more a part of this. I want to feel, having this national job and traveling all the time, I was not connected to the places that I lived. When my kids were little, I was connected through them, but I wasn't civically engaged. My brain and my energies were always spent elsewhere. And I wanted to really be grounded in this place and be a part of it.
Yeah, I remember that feeling. The first year I lived here, I had a remote job in DC, my old job. And I didn't know anybody here, right? Because we're adults, it was family, and we obviously the kids, they had a couple school friends and that stuff, but you don't know anything about the community, nor do you really care to, because work life happens elsewhere, and you have your work friends and you have your other friends and you have your family, and then there's not all that much room to I think I went cycling with a group a couple times, but that was it. That was the extent. And at some point I was also oh yeah, I actually I live here, but I don't know anybody.
Right. And working remotely can do that. You sit in this one room in your house and you talk to people who are somewhere else, and that's great and fulfilling, but at the end of the day you're I'm not connected to this place that I live.
Yeah.
And there's a lot going on here to connect to.
No, it's true. And when I started the marketing agency, I kind of started looking, obviously, and I had no idea. I think I was just it's this little town, nothing happens here. Once in a while there's a concert at the Colonial, I guess. So that kind of your desire to do something here in the community that you live, then I guess made you leave your remote job and look for something in person. Is that how you then found the community kitchen?
Yeah, so there was an opening for a director of development and communications position at the community kitchen. And I'm like, that's what I do, and I can do that in a way that will really have an effect on this community. I took a look at the work that the community kitchen was doing, the history of the community kitchen, 40 years of doing this work. And one of the things that stuck out to me immediately was, and, that I came in kind of preaching right away was, y'all are too humble. Like, why are you so quiet about this? Like, this is amazing what is happening here. We need to tell this story. We need to, people care about this and want to be a part of it. Like, we need to open the doors and invite everybody in. Like, this is huge what's going on here. And so I was really excited to step into that, and especially to be the steward of a brand that is so rich in history and so well thought of is something that I take really seriously. I mean, to hold that in my hands is a precious thing.
Do you think that is the difference between like national nonprofits and like especially local small nonprofits, that the national nonprofits know that they're a brand and they think about themselves like a business would in terms of marketing, but local nonprofits, they are so focused on like the mission and the impact and surviving on sponsorships and like fundraising so they can make it to the next year, that they never think about, oh, how does the rest of the community know about us? Like how?
Right. Stepping back, the people who are in the trenches doing that work are often not the ones to stand back and, toot their own horn or tell that story. And, it sort of reminds me going back to my art background, right? Like people who are really good artists, which by the way, I never was one of them, tend to not be great business people, right? They tend to not market themselves particularly well, but they might be a tremendously talented and incredible artist. So I think it's the same thing with these nonprofits where people are in the trenches doing this work and they're incredible, but they're not, right? And yes, the nationals, we have a huge marketing department and, they spend millions of dollars on their, marketing portfolio. And
yeah, I can totally see that because the skill sets are different, right? Like, I mean, the skill set of somebody who's like very impact driven in their little nonprofit doing the good work every day, they're not the ones that like sit back and it's like, how can we build this brand? It's like, that's two different skills. So is that where you started then at the community kitchen, is sort of how do we get the word out more? How do we?
Yeah, definitely. Coming in as the director of development and communications, right? For me, and coming from where I had come from, again, it's about relationship building and it's about storytelling, right? And so how do we tell that story in a way? And when I always talk about doing like fundraising 101, that for me, it's not about old school fundraising of calling you up and saying, hey, Jan, can you make a donation this year? But, so there is a component of that. But the way I look at fundraising is I tell the story and I share my passion. And if I'm telling it to you and you're also excited and passionate about that, my goal for the end of our conversation is for you to ask me, how can I get involved? What can I do? This is really exciting what you're doing and I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, because basically the idea is to make your sales pitch so good that people want to work with you afterwards, instead of you being like, can you please just write another check, please? You did it for the last 30 years, so.
Right, yeah. I mean, and we have to start from the premise that you care, right? Yeah. And I learned this a lot at JDRF, right? Like 1% to 3% of the population has type 1 diabetes. And then you kind of widen the circle from there of people whose loved ones have it, right? But still, it's a very small segment of the population. Many more people have type 2 diabetes or have had an incidence of cancer in their family, or, whatever your cause is. There is generally a connection that you, for some reason, personally care about this. And if I approach you about a cause that's kind of far out there, you'd be like, yeah, that's not, that's interesting and important, but it's not in my giving portfolio. It's like, I care about these things, and that I need to find the people who do care, that we are passionate about the same things. We're in alignment, and you come to me, you're like, I want to be a part of this. Yeah. This is truly exciting.
No, it makes complete sense, because I mean, people who don't like cats, they won't donate to a cat shelter, right? Like, and so you find the people in, I guess, I'm just envisioning like circles of people that get bigger and bigger that somehow are connected.
And that's not to say that those people aren't philanthropic and wonderful people, but maybe they care about Habitat for Humanity, or they care about, they lost a loved one to cancer and they're supporting, either their local hospital or, some other foundation. So, where our passions are, again, it's no judgment. We just all have, different areas of interest and passion.
So you started at the community kitchen as a director of development and communication. How did you end up being the executive director?
Yeah, again, not on my bingo card. I was perfectly happy. As you know, I love fundraising. It's like hitting the lottery every time. And, I love that side of the business. The community kitchen was going through a leadership change. And this executive director position opened up. And sort of from my business experience and my eye, I sort of approached the board and said, hey, I think you have an opportunity here to consolidate these two leadership positions, making, us a little bit more financially viable, and also in big part hoping to take care of the team that's doing this work a little bit more, take some of that money and take care of the folks who are doing this work.
Yeah, because those are expensive positions in
Right.
terms of leadership.
Right. And so while I had no interest in that particular position, I was sort of, at this point, I had fallen in love. I fell in love with Keene. I fell in love with Community Kitchen. I fell in love with the team over there, with the mission. And, I had the skill set and the ability to do it. And I thought, you know what? I am very much hoping that this is my last stop on the career train. This would be a good way to, go out. If I can steward this organization into its next phase, then that would be a really tremendously high note for me to call it.
So what does the next phase look like?
These are good questions. And so anybody listening, don't hold me to any of this, but it's one of my favorite conversations and favorite things to dream about. We are coming to the end of a 3-year strategic plan at the Community Kitchen. This strategic plan was very internal in terms of getting our own organization on its feet, in terms of the staffing and our programs and systems internally. And so I think it's an opportunity now to look to the future. One of the things that might surprise people about the Community Kitchen is that we have no revenue source. We do not receive any state or federal funding. Everything that we're getting is coming from grants that I'm writing or generous donors in this community, a little bit of municipal funding that we seek, but there's nothing that we can count on. Every year it's starting over again. So definitely introducing a revenue generating enterprise into the organization, whether that is bottling one of Chef Anthony's amazing sauces, or doing more catering, or getting a food truck, opening a restaurant. Like, there are 1,000 ways that we can think about an entrepreneurial enterprise.
So basically, like, put a for-profit component somewhere within the organization that helps carry the...
Yeah, sort of the Paul Newman strategy, right? Of like, any profits that we make, run this enterprise, which, is really exciting because we also have an incredible, passionate team and this incredible chef who I think is one of the best in the area. So I think that there's more that we can do there. I think also it's emerging that we are a really big resource to other pantries. So in addition to being direct service, we provided over 400,000 meals to folks in the Monadnock region last year. So that's huge direct service. But we are also providing resources to other pantries. We're the backbone of the Food Pantries Collective and the fiduciary, and we open our doors every Friday. Actually, it's going on right now. We call it the Free for All Friday, where we invite other pantries to come in and take whatever resources we have left over. We're providing meals to 100 Nights every night. We're providing dinner to them and other agencies who aren't even strictly food resource agencies. So I think that there's a bigger role for us to play in terms of being a resource to other pantries. And when we look at hunger and the need in the Monadnock region, us serving a meal in Keene, are we really serving the most people as efficiently as we can? What we've found through our mobile pantry program is that those who are experiencing food insecurity generally also have a lack of access to transportation, which is a barrier to them getting to us to get the food. So we've got to get the food out to them.
Yeah, and that's really hard because, we, like, Cheshire County is like the size of a German state, but like the population density outside of Keene is like zero.
Right, and there are real food deserts out there, and transportation deserts. So it has become more and more apparent that the need that we were trying to fill 40 years ago is a little bit different now. And how can we address it in terms of moving more food out to meeting folks where they are? So there's definitely looking at our mobile pantry program, looking at how can we be a better partner and resource to all of this incredible array of volunteer-run little pantries that are all over the place. Are they everywhere they need to be? Can we help seed new ones where there aren't any? And can we start helping to get resources out to those further reaches?
To basically be like the operating system for these local food pantries. So like to run a food pantry becomes a lot less difficult because they can like tap into you for the support.
Right. And also,
Yeah.
we're one of the big, like a lot of these food pantries are volunteer run completely. And maybe they're out of a church or a firehouse or a community center run by volunteers. And they don't have the computer systems that we have. They don't have the volunteer coordinator that we have. They don't have, so if we can help provide some best practices and even just moving, we have this great new truck that you've heard me talk about. If I can offer that resource to help get that food out to them, can we pick up at the food bank in Manchester for you and bring it to you? Can we, so I think that there's a big role for us to play in making sure that that food is getting out to further reaches. That is absolutely not to say that I would in any way suggest that we stop doing our signature programs, which is our pantry and our hot meals program.
Yeah. And that, I mean, because those are still like, they're always going to be the core of what the community kitchen is like hot meals and the pantry here in Keene.
Right. But still, being mindful of, are we being as efficient as possible? Are we working well with others that are in our same, oftentimes people ask me, well, what's this organization doing? Or how are you partnering with them? Or is it redundant? And, my response is, I think we can all be involved in providing food for our neighbors. If every single person in this town helped provide a meal for somebody that needed it, it would not be too much. So every single organization that's doing it, from St. Vincent de Paul to, every small town that has a pantry in it, is important and doing really important work. And if we can help support that, I think that that's the best role that we can play. This isn't like the for-profit world where, oh, wait, you're in my sandbox. There's not enough room for both of us. There's room here for all of us. And how can we, as the big dogs, support you and be more efficient, make sure that we are getting that help out to as many people as we can?
So, I mean, obviously we just did Leadership Monadnock together. So like, obviously there's tons of collaboration because I think you said this once, you're like, well, there's this baseline bias because everybody who's in Leadership Monadnock is baseline more collaborative than anybody else here because that's like, otherwise you wouldn't sign up in the first place. But I think even in the for-profit world, there's a lot of collaboration happening around here, like, which I find, like, coming from DC, very unique. Because in DC, very cutthroat, everybody's pitted against each other. But here, it seems like, at least sort of what I'm seeing, which is lots of business services type stuff, people like, I talked to like Jeff Whitcomb a lot, and like we're competitors, not really competitors, but like we kind of do the same thing. And I think it's fascinating how in this region there is this strong sense of collaboration, even like definitely in the nonprofit world, but also in the for-profit world.
And I think, I was listening to a few of your episodes to see what I was going to be in for here. And, it really, what I'm getting as the takeaway here, and one of the things that I love most about Keene, is that we're all interested in building a thriving community. And in order for our community to thrive, there's a public health aspect to it. There's a mental health aspect to it. There is obviously food security. But in terms of our businesses thriving, you were talking to somebody about, what that means in terms of housing, right? In terms of tourism and bringing money into, like, in order to create this entire ecosystem that we all want to live in, we are all responsible for making it thrive. And I think that's what we see here in the for-profit landscape, that they're so generous to us at the community kitchen, that they come in and they volunteer, so I could rattle off names, but I wouldn't want to leave anybody out. But, so many of the businesses in this area financially contribute to us, but they also come in and are hands-on. I was listening to your conversation with Mark Bowden, and he was saying, when I come to the community kitchen to serve dinner, I'm just one more person serving dinner. Like, we work with over 120 volunteers a month. So, they're coming from every walk of life, every organization here, supporting us creating a community that we want to live in.
Yeah. And I think that's really cool that, like, and this is what I love about this podcast, is like everybody's kind of in their own world working towards the same-ish thing, whether it's, somebody at Franklin Pierce, whether it's a nonprofit or for-profit, doesn't really matter. Like, everybody's like, I also picked the people, so
right.
But I think it's just fascinating.
But even when you look at the people that, like, you can see the thread that's interwoven and how we all, work together, and that, the bankers aren't the bad guys, the manufacturers aren't the bad guys, people who need food, it's not their fault, they're not the bad guys, and that, we are all part of this system.
It's definitely true. It's fascinating. So, as we sort of close the episode, I always ask people, because it's actually Friday today, surprisingly, but what does a good weekend look like for you? What do you do?
Yeah, so a good weekend always starts for me. I got to put a plug out there for my friends over at Kickboxing Keene. So kickboxing on Saturday morning is the best of the week. So that's how it usually starts. This month in particular has been my lack of work-life balance month. As we were talking before, I don't have much of a work-life balance anyway, but that's okay with me. So there have been a lot of events, and I love going out into the community and representing the community kitchen. So I was at Taste of Keene. Tomorrow night, I'll be at the Swamp Bats game. So we're out there a lot. We're doing mobile pantry. So Saturdays often right now are work-related. Sunday for me is time in the garden, and on my luckiest of Sundays, my now adult daughter and her wife come for dinner, and so I spend the day cooking and cleaning and getting ready for some family time.
Cool. No, I think that sounds wonderful. And it resonates to me that you say that, like, you don't have much of a work-life balance, but that's okay. I think about this a lot because so many people talk about work-life balance, but, like, it makes me almost feel bad. And I'm like, well, mine isn't great, but I'm pretty happy with it. So, like, I think it's interesting.
I think it's important when your work is part of your life. I mean, I think I probably learned this to an extreme when I was working at JDRF, right? It was so important to me and to my family. My family was involved. They did events with me. My daughter was the poster child speaker. Like, it was part of the fabric of our family. And so, like, there's no possible way I could leave food security at the door at the end of the day. I mean, this is, people who don't have food, it's with them 24 hours a day. That's not part of the gig that I can shut that off at 5.
Well, yeah. And plus you're the director, so you're responsible for literally everything. And it's not like those worries stop when, like, the clock hits 5 o'clock. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, Barb. That was fascinating.
Well, thank you. It was fun talking with you.
Well, that was a great conversation. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please leave us a nice review wherever you're listening to this. It really means the world. Our episodes drop every Friday, so stay tuned for more insightful chats from It's Freitag.